Hi, I'm Untitled Chapter, and this is Experience CTN, where we're going to learn more about CTN's volunteers and producers who have supported community media over the past years. I'm here with James Trost, host of A2 Insight, who has been a community producer since 2008. Welcome, James.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, let's just get to it. How did you hear about CTN?
Well, let's see. I first learned about CTN actually when I moved to this side of town from downtown Ann Arbor.
Okay.
I have a townhome literally 3 minutes from here, and I remember driving by and seeing Community Television Network, and I thought it was kind of intrigued. Well, this is kind of cool, and it's close by. Mm-hmm. So I did some research and found that they were holding, you could produce your own TV show or come here, just go through some training, and I thought, hey, well, why not? It's convenient. I could walk to the place, although I sometimes drive, even though it takes 2 minutes. So that's how I initially learned about CTN and its role.
Cool. And why did you decide to start volunteering?
Well, at first I thought it'd be kind of fun. Well, my father did a show when we grew up. I grew up in Ann Arbor, and he did a 7-part series on Ann Arbor's 150th birthday as a community, and he loved to do radio. He did a radio program here, and I also did some television when I was in junior high school. We had a television program in the school, and I would do the anchor report. So I've always liked, doing things with media. I like to write, and so this just seemed like kind of a fun thing, and it was free. So I thought, why not, find out more about it?
Yeah. What kind of workshops did you take?
Well, I took workshops with Mike, who's still here, Mike Koski, and we actually were held in this studio. We did everything from learning how to use cameras, remotes. At the time, there was a rather cumbersome edit studio that was difficult, and I was mainly interested because I wanted to do things. The program I had was called Welcome to Washington initially, and it was going to be something about people who would be new to the area, what would be fun things to do. And so it was fairly involved because you had to take the camera with you had to come back and do editing and so on. So it was a lot of time involved. So I got into it after learning how to use the various equipment, and so that's how I really got started in it.
So you're a host of A2 Insight, and then you mentioned you started with Welcome to Washington. What other shows have you produced with CTN?
Well, the first show I produced was actually an interview and a tour of the Michigan Theater. It's actually my most viewed show that I've done since being here, and it was an interview with Russ Collins, who's the executive director. We had a wonderful tour of the history and all the information that associated with the Michigan tour. And then we did a twist that for some reason one of the reasons I got back into this was I have Comcast and Channel 17 is there, and for some reason around Halloween, my program, the Bethlehem Cemetery Tour with local historian Winston Stevens, is always on. Yeah. And it kind of reminded me, it may not sound somewhat morbid to go and have learn about the people who lived and were actually buried out in Bethlehem Cemetery, but it always pops up, and I thought, hey, I forgot about it. Maybe I should go back and get recertified and start something new. And that's kind of how I got into A2 Insight.
Cool. Well, we have a clip kind of the shows you've done, so why don't we take a look?
Sure.
Many people helped create our wonderful community, and it is important to remember their contributions, even though their earthly lives are long gone. So we are very pleased to announce that we'll be having an extensive inside tour of the Michigan Theater.
My name is James Trost, and this is A2 Recovery. Our program focuses on issues relevant to the Ann Arbor alcohol and drug recovery community.
Today's guest is Trish Cortez, the Executive Director of the Washtenaw County Community Mental Health.
Today's guests are Amber Horwitz and Justin Jajiski. Hello. Today's guest is Mr. Dennis Pink.
That's me.
A psychotherapist with Sullivan and Nolan and Associates. Today is the inaugural edition of Season 2 here at A2 Insight, and we're very pleased to have as our first guest this year, Mr. Jim Trost of Colliers International. I like to start out all my shows with the same. We want to learn a little bit more about you. Our viewers would like to know a little bit more. If you could just start out by giving us a little bit more about where you grew up, your early influences, family life, and so on, and why don't you get us through your academic interest in college?
Could you give us a little bit of a history of just the whole concept of community mental health? What did it grow out of, and its origins here in Ann Arbor? What is community mental health, and where does it come from?
Sure. So community mental health is actually President Kennedy in 1964 signed into law the Community Mental Health Act.
So could you give me just an idea of the kinds of businesses that, and we'll get more, not indigenous ones, not me starting a business. Let's say I'm a business owner, not in this area, and I'm thinking about coming to Ann Arbor, and I pulled into your office, and why would I be interested in relocating or starting a business here?
Well, a good example is some of the tech firms.
And until next time, I'm James Trost. This is A2 Insight. Have a good day.
Well, that was great. Can you kind of tell me like where you shoot the show and how that whole process works?
Well, actually, I use what's called the Hotline Studio here at CTN. It's actually right next door to this larger studio. And it's a great facility because one of the advantages of being able to do this is that the Hotline Studio is really, quite frankly, I do most of it by myself. I learned how to utilize the equipment with some help from various individuals that work here. And you're able to I have 2 cameras, and I'm able to use a mouse to click between cameras and create the back set. As you see, the set somewhat evolved.
Yeah.
Initially, we had a skyline image on a green screen, and now it's amazing with the technology. It looks like a real studio, but it's actually exactly the same set. But I liked the format of that because I was able to come in here, try to be able to get guests signed up, and then record something and then get it out. And so it's the technology has made it much easier to produce programming as well.
So what's your turnaround, from the very beginning to when
Well,
your show airs?
it's gotten better the more I've done it. I think there's 16 or 17 that I've done of these since February of last year.
Okay.
And I used to take, depending on when I can get to the edit studio, because now to add the graphics and the credits at the end. So now I can usually get them done within one episode. Usually takes 45 minutes to 30 minutes to film, or 45 depending on editing, maybe another 2 hours. So it usually takes about 2 to 3 hours before I submit it to get aired at some future date.
Wow. And so how do you come up with the topics of your show? Do people come and approach you, or do you approach them? How does that all work?
No, I actually do most of the recruiting of my guests. I try to be aware of certain things that are going on in the community of AnnArbor.com, or to read articles. If somebody who just sounds interesting, or there's certainly a topic of interest. When I first got into this, my first guest, particularly with A2 Insight, was a gentleman running for office. And he was the first to respond. And so this is Jaime Megara. He was running for Ward Council, which this is in Ward 4.
Right.
And I had his challenger. So I first started out with politicians, and then it's just various individuals that are interesting to me. Other people writing books in Ann Arbor, something specifically with Ann Arbor focus. I've everything from the sheriff to editors of the Ann Arbor Observer, and then people who are doing various things in the community. So it's really kind of, I've had a lot of folks I contact who don't get back to me either. So it's kind of hit or miss to see who might join or wants to show up and do it. And
Right.
But I've been very lucky. I've gotten most of the people I've asked to be on the show have showed up.
That's amazing. Has anyone approached you to be on the show?
Mainly local politicians.
Okay.
Normally when we get close to the running season, which is fine because I think it's important. I do see CTN and just the whole idea of this being a public service, because I can't imagine if you're, particularly with people who are running for local office, the more I can, find out what your views are. People who are watching the show can say, how do I know who's person to vote for? Hopefully I try to ask questions that I think might be relevant and that someone would be interested in knowing, particularly as it relates to, as this is another season, I'll be doing several more of these upcoming, because we have an interesting race this year for mayor. It's contested. We haven't had that for a while.
Okay.
And I think in this ward specifically, I have one challenger. There are 3 people running for ward. The new one just came on. So I hope I'll probably do a lot of those, and I'd like to expand. I've been trying to get other guests. I'd love to get the president of the University of Michigan or Jim Harbaugh, but there's certain people you can't always get, so I keep trying.
They have a pretty packed schedule.
Right.
Yes. Is there a topic that you like to cover more? Like, do you like focusing on politicians more? Do you like focus on events or the arts?
Well, it's interesting. It's evolving. As I said, this was originally, it was easier to get guests, political guests, but it's evolved. It's interesting. I'm much more now that I'm more active in the community. I had a recent guest was the director of bands at Pioneer High School. And just having grown up in this community, the amazing connection between the arts and culture in this community, and just the quality of the music program in Ann Arbor. I mean, I showed up for this Saturday night Pioneer bands thing, and I just was blown away at the quality of this.
Yeah.
I mean, I always knew it was great because we're one of the few communities in the country that every fifth grader gets a free instrument for at least 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's part of it. And I think most people really don't know that. Now, you don't have to continue with music. You don't have to go on with it. But, to see the end product, and again, what most people don't realize in the community is Ann Arbor has one of the best programs in the country.
Right.
How would you know that unless you learn about it? And
Right.
that's kind of a unique thing, and that kind of dovetails, too, with history. Like, I had a guy who was a professor at the university who had a book about the history of Ann Arbor's Germans, and there's a very strong German influence in this community, and Professor Whelan his thesis, or his argument is that one of the strengths and one of the reasons we have such a strong music program is the Schwabians who came from that part of Germany. Mm-hmm. Music was a very important part of their lives, so maybe that was somehow inculcated into the history of Ann Arbor to have such a unique program where at least at 5th grade and 6th grade, every student in the Ann Arbor public school system is able to learn an instrument of their choice. It's unique, and again, the results are clear. So I would say I like to get something that makes Ann Arbor stand out as it relates to programming. But the things that people like, there are other issues that are important. Just so politics tends to be stuff, and it's more current, and it seems to affect more people. But the uniqueness of Ann Arbor, I like to try to find more guests that can give us that aspect to it.
Cool. Is there a favorite guest that you've had over the years?
Well, I must, but again, it goes back to, it was prior to when we did A2 Insight, because I really enjoyed I studied history when I was in university, and I really enjoyed the Bethlehem Cemetery tour. Now, I know sitting there these shows were longer, these were like 45 minutes, but the guest I had was an amazing local historian here. He died a couple of years ago, Wystan Stevens, who was very well known in the community. He does something also with Forest Hill Cemetery, and the guy's just an encyclopedic knowledge of the history of this community. And so I can just remember, having him come out there, and his van wasn't doing very well and everything else, and he just went on and on about, he knew everything about the graves in that cemetery. I thought, that's an amazing love of our community. And I think that's ultimately what I want. I want people to know that this is a unique community. I like living here, and hopefully, if you live here, you want to learn as much as you can. So I hope that I try to make my show at least informative and make questions somewhat relevant to the topic.
Very cool. Do you have a favorite production memory, like something that happened on set or during the editing process?
Well, editing here can be difficult because, as I said, when I used to do this, previous to recently, we didn't have a more advanced kind of equipment. Mm-hmm. But production was particularly for choosing my most recent set. I can remember sitting there with one of your staff members here going through all of these different options for a set design, and this is something for those who are not in television. This is an actual set, right. But when you see the programming, you'll see that blue thing. It looks like CNN. That's fake. And so I can remember spending almost 20 minutes laughing going through these various sets with Alicia May, one of your wonderful staff people here,
a producer of the show.
And we went clicking through all, and I kind of make comment, no, that looks like this is ridiculous. This looks like something in the 40s. And so we went through like 100 of these set designs. And we just had a fun time going through trying to choose what would be the best set. So every interaction here is always fun. The folks are good to work with, and they're obviously, this is what they want to do, and so they're very helpful too, which helps because this is not my profession. This is just something I like to do because it's fun.
Right. So what's next for A2 Insight?
Well, this is going to be a busy season. I think the greatest thing has been is the more that we're on, the more people know about it, the more people watch it. I really would like it to be a weekly show.
Okay.
And the biggest challenge is just trying to coordinate the interview schedule around other people's schedules. And we're going to start out next season. As I said, there's going to be several politicians coming in because, as I said, this is a big election. Mm-hmm. One of the differences this year is that we are electing people for 4-year terms.
Yes.
So more people tend to run when they don't have to run more frequently.
Right.
So there are some, and as I said, there's a contested mayoral election. So I hope to. And there are some really interesting issues for people to consider in this community. Particularly the biggie this year seems to be what to do with this Y downtown, Y lot, and some of the other issues. So I'll focus on it. I'd really like to get more guests that particularly somewhat connect with the university that have books and things of interest. I really find the history of Ann Arbor, or even people, particularly at the university, that have written something that might be of interest because I think that's something we're losing today too. Not enough people read. There's too much immediacy through the communication. I just think promoting reading and books that local authors have done, I'd like to get more of them. So if there are anybody out there that has a book that's halfway decent, you'd like to promote it, I would certainly that would be another group I'd like to work with, particularly in the arts community in general. It would be areas I'd like to promote for guests.
Very cool. Why should people support CTN?
Well, I can remember this, but people don't know, and again, going back to the history, this thing was here since 1973. And I can remember at that point, and I was in 4th or 5th grade, people had cable, and it was the most unique thing we'd ever seen. At the time, it was mainly athletes' parents, because they were filming local Huron sports and so on. There wasn't the program, it wasn't as exotic. But I think it performs a unique function. I don't know anywhere else that you could, particularly if you're in this, that can give you the visual connection with our community. And the fact that people take the time, and there's such a variety of things on the program, and as I said, ultimately, this is a way to connect with your community as certain other media formats are disappearing. I mean, there's no print out there, and you come over here, you volunteer, you don't have to, you can do whatever you want. I mean, I think that's amazing to me is that, people can come here and say what they want, do what they want, there's no restrictions, and yet it's also a valuable service for those that truly want to be something that's unique. And as I said, unique for us is the fact that this is one of the oldest cable systems in the country.
Yes.
And I can remember the most thing that we also filmed when I was in 5th grade, some plays that we were doing, and we filmed them actually behind here at the superintendent school, and then they were shown on the TV.
How cool.
And this is a big thing. Now, I mean, this may sound quaint to you because you don't understand this, but the idea that you could see something on television that was made locally, that was a big deal, and now we all take that for granted.
I can only imagine. I mean, I grew up with television and cable, obviously, but when I saw my name in the newspaper, I was like, oh my God, that's me. Like,
well, and
people know who I am.
And that's why Ann Arbor this is a valuable resource, and I guess my thought would be I wish more people would do it.
Right. Do you have any advice for future community producers out there?
Well, I would say, the key is you have to come in and learn how to use the equipment. I mean, there is a time commitment initially to doing this, but I think if you can find, it's not that much. I mean, you do need to learn how to use the equipment. So my suggestion would be try to find some time, find out when the scheduling are, come through it, and just have fun with it and stick with it. Because I think a part of the problem with anything, people find other things in their lives that you have to make it a priority.
Right.
If you're going to stick with it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, James, for joining me.
You're very welcome.
And thanks for watching, and stay tuned for future episodes. In the meantime, why not come in and experience all we have to offer for yourself? Visit us online at a2gov.org/CTN. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at CTN Ann Arbor. I want to thank our crew, Phil Booz, Gay Shaughnessy, Jamie Chu, and Alicia May. And I'm your host, Natalia Tejeda. See you next time.